This is the I'm Giving Notice podcast, episode 5.
This is the I'm Giving Notice podcast, where you get to take control of life's big three and have the career, relationships, and health that you've always dreamed of. Now, get ready to say, I'm Giving Notice, with your host, Mace Haroff.
Hey, what's up? This is Mace Haroff, and you are going to be very glad that you are checking out the I'm Giving Notice podcast today. My guest is none other than Bruce Turkel. Bruce has helped create some of the world's most compelling brands, including Miami. He has also worked with Hasbro, Nike, American Express, Charles Schwab, Citicorp, Discovery Networks, Bacardi, Somalia Hotels, Azamara Club Cruises, and many more great companies. A captivating speaker and author, Bruce has spoken at MIT, Harvard, TEDx, and I was there for that, and hundreds of corporate and industry conferences. Bruce appears regularly on Fox Business and has been on CNN, ABC, CBS, and NPR. That's some alphabet soup there, Bruce. He has been featured in the New York Times, Fast Company, Communication Arts, and Adweek. Bruce, thank you so much for being on the I'm Giving Notice podcast with me.
Thanks for inviting me, Mace. I'm looking forward to this.
All right, very cool. All right, let's start off with your area of expertise. You're known as a branding expert. So a lot of people, when they're thinking about creating their own business or looking for a career alternative, they start thinking about their brand. The topic of branding always comes up. So Bruce, let's start with the basics. What is a brand?
You know, I'm really glad you asked me that question because usually when I talk to people about creating a brand, they think a brand is one of three things. They think it's their name, they think it's their logo, they think it's their tagline. And so they say, hey, we need a brand, meaning we need you to come up with a name and a logo for us. But that's not right. Those things are just indicators of the brand. The brand really has two very clear separations. One is the brand is what is it you stand for, you personally or your company or your service or whatever. What is the authentic truth of what you're offering that your customer or client is going to purchase and enjoy? And then the second part of the brand is every single touch point between you and your customer that confirms or damages that specific brand message. So it's who are you, how does it matter to your consumer, and then how do you back it up when you interact with them?
I was going to say, can you give us an example of some of the touch points you're talking about?
Sure. As a matter of fact, my blog post next week talks about somebody who called a company and had a very bad experience with the receptionist. Now, this guy was calling for a big piece of business. Oof. I'm talking about hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of dollars of business. But he had a bad experience with the receptionist, and guess what? He went somewhere else. I don't care how good your brand, as people would define it, is. I don't care how many ads you bought, Super Bowl ads you bought for millions and millions of dollars. If you call the company and you have a bad experience with the person you talk to, guess what? Nothing else matters. So I think it's pretty safe to say that the experience you have on the phone the first time you call, or when you walk into the retail outlet, or the first time you receive a package from the online store in the mail, or the website, or whatever, are all examples of the brand experience.
You know, it's funny. The next question I was going to ask you is, how do we influence our brand? And it sounds like there's a lot of different ways, almost too many ways to really describe, because what you're saying is it's everything.
Well, yes, there's too many ways to describe if, in fact, we were going to make a list and go through them all. However, the only way to do it properly is to know what your brand stands for to begin with, which means before you worry about, again, the name, the logo, the website design, any of those things, you need a strategy. You need to know, here's who I am. Here's what I offer. Here's why anyone in the public, consumer, B2B, B2C, whatever, here's why they would care. And if you can craft that, if you can take that message and reduce it to a few words that you can clearly communicate, well, after that, all of your brand creation becomes a lot easier because you know the framework within which you want to work. So yes, the ultimate number of things you could have is infinitesimal. However, they all come from one very single, hopefully very clear communicative point.
So the word I heard in there really was clarity, that you have to start with clarity when it comes to your brand.
Yeah, all the time. We speak to clients and they'll say, oh, we want you to come in and do a brand refresh for us. Okay, so what is it you do? And they'll tell us, whatever they sell or whatever they bring their clients in or whatever. And then we'll say, okay, why would anybody care? And then they'll tell us, and we'll say, okay, now what makes you different? What makes you special? What are your points of difference? What are your points of excellence? We go through a very clear protocol to figure all this out. But often they'll say, well, we're really good at what we do. Okay, what do you do? Well, whatever the different services, we're really good at it. Well, guess what? Lots of people are really good at it because lots of people do what you do. Do they do it as well? I don't know, but it's only a promise anyways until you start working with somebody. And nowadays, thanks to the ubiquitousness of internet, I can get services performed for me anywhere in the world. I mean, we all know about people who have personal assistants in Malaysia and are using web designers in Germany and are using social media experts in Thailand. So our trading area has gotten so big that if you can't communicate to me why what you do matters to me, guess what? I'm going somewhere else.
That makes perfect sense. So, Bruce, we tend to think of brands only with business. As people, with the relationships we have, do we have a personal brand?
Of course we do. Well, we do whether we want to or not. I mean, brands grow and they thrive, or brands grow and they don't flourish, regardless of whether you take care of it or not. But if you're an employee, you have a brand within the company within which you work. If you are a parent, if you are a child in a family, if you're a spouse, you have a brand. Your friends, whatever extracurricular activities you do, if you play on a golf foursome, or if you play poker with your buddies, or if you go to a swimming club or whatever, people know who you are. They know what to expect. And remember, it doesn't have to be a product. It can be the interaction that you get between people. So they know what to expect from you, and they know if you make their lives better or worse. And you actually can control that. And by doing so, you can change the way you're treated and change how people respond to you.
If you wear a certain kind of watch, if you're wearing a fancy gold watch, if you're driving a Ferrari, is that your brand?
No, that's like the logo, or that's like the name. That might be an indicator of your brand. The fancy gold watch could be because you want people to know that you can afford a fancy gold watch. The fancy gold watch could be because you were completely and madly in love with your dad or your grandfather, let's say, and your grandfather left you his watch. And so you want to wear, that old joke that this is my grandfather's watch, and on his deathbed, he sold it to me. But I gave him a check. So the watch could make a statement that says, look, I really loved my grandfather, and this is a little bit of him I carry around with me, right? Or the watch could mean, I love timepieces. I love watches. And so this one is just a stunning version. The interpretation of the brand can be different. And Ferrari, we can say the same thing. Ferrari can be, I want to be able to pick up girls at nightclubs. But it could also be, I'm just crazy about cars. It could also be, I have more money than King Henry, and I just want to spend it on anything. It could be, I want to show off. It could be, I work for Ferrari. I mean, it could mean lots of different things.
It sounds like when it comes to branding, the way we're talking about the personal brand right now, that brand can be any one of a number of things. In other words, how someone is interpreting the gold watch or the car that you're driving, it's really up to them. So an outsider's interpretation of the brand image that you're projecting could be very different than what you want to project. In other words, with your grandfather, you're wearing the watch because it has a sentimental connection with your grandfather. Someone else will see it and say, boy, will you look at that ostentatious watch that guy's wearing? He's just trying to show everybody how rich he is.
Well, in my last book on branding, we went through 7 mandatory rules for building a brand. And the first one is all about them, meaning the way your brand is interpreted by your consumer, more importantly, your potential consumer, is really what the brand means, because it doesn't matter so much what it means to you. It matters what it means to the person out there. So let's use that watch as an example. So I show up at a meeting and I'm wearing that big gold watch. And to your point, someone says, wow, look at that ostentatious watch. Why is that guy wearing that? Okay, so far that's not doing my brand any good. Then After the meeting, perhaps, I'm talking to the potential client and he says, and maybe he says sarcastically, "Oh, nice watch." Or, "Hey, I can see you do real well," or "Your fees must be really high. Look at that watch you're wearing." And instead of saying, "Yes, look at my watch. Isn't it big and gold?" And, whatever brand, if I say, "Oh my God, I love this watch. My grandfather, I was so close with my grandfather. He was so special to me. And, he died way too young, and I really don't get to be with him anymore, of course, but this is the one thing that he cherished. And so when he left it to me, you know what? This watch really just says how much I cared about him." Now, didn't the whole consideration of my brand just change?
Absolutely.
So those tools, they become tools, those different things. Again, logos, names, taglines, watches, that you have to work into a strategy based on who you want to be. Or maybe you want to say, "Yes, I am the most successful private injury attorney out there. I make millions of dollars for people, so much so that I can afford this really expensive, ostentatious watch."
In your book, with the first rule being it's all about them, many people, their brand is it's all about me when you meet them. One of life's big three that I'm trying to address here to help people with in the podcast is building better relationships. So for people who tend to focus on themselves, what kinds of things can they do to build a better personal brand where it's actually saying it's all about someone else?
Well, if you're going to build a brand that's focused entirely on you, you'd better be a celebrity. There are people in society that we want to be around, be near. Or what is the key to a celebrity? There's one of two things. You either want to be with them or be them. So if you're going to be a celebrity, great. There's not a lot of us, but if you're going to be a celebrity, that's terrific. And then you can build a brand about yourself because I want to be around you, the celebrity, the actor, the sports star, the rock star, the model, whatever. However, if you're like most of us, and in fact you're not really a celebrity, then building a brand about yourself really says to the rest of the world, "I don't really care about you." And here's the sad thing. No one else does either. What they care about is themselves. So if you build a brand that talks about what they care about, talks about their hopes and dreams, talks about their aspirations, and how, in fact, you make those better, then your brand soars. If you can make someone else feel better about themselves, your brand soars. I always say a good brand makes you feel good. A great brand makes you feel good about yourself.
So from the standpoint of a personal brand, it sounds to me like one of the best things that any of us can do is really show an interest in the other person and demonstrate that interest with what we say and what we do.
Absolutely.
All right. Very, very cool. Let's go to one of the other of life's big three. I want to talk about health a little bit. You and I live in the world of content creation, speaking, media. So part of our brand is authenticity. And many speakers are up on the platform. They're talking about taking control of their lives. And then you notice that they don't really seem to have such great control of certain aspects of their life. And a lot of times it's their health. They're not getting enough sleep. They lack energy. They're overweight. Can you talk about health as part of one's personal brand or even their corporate brand? And how do you manage your health? How can people do a better job of managing their health?
Well, that's a whole bunch of questions worked into one, isn't it? Clearly, there's the point that you said, which I really liked, which is this concept of authenticity. And I think you have to just come down to the fact that if you're not walking the walk, nobody's going to listen to you talk the talk. To your point, if the person's up on stage talking about health, and by the way, they're smoking while they're talking about it, yeah, it's kind of hard to believe that, in fact, they're that concerned about their health. The problem is once you establish a false sense of self, nothing else is believable. So authenticity cannot be something that's faked. I mean, again, great line, that the key to a presentation is honesty and sincerity. And once you can fake that, everything else is easy. But that works as a joke, but it doesn't work in real life.
No, it doesn't.
If people find that, in fact, your brand, your personal presentation is not in accordance with who you say you are, well, what happens is they just throw the baby out with the bathwater, and all of it is ignored. So clearly, you need to be talking about things that you do. I mean, you and I, in an organization that we've been in, we've heard people get up on stage and tell people in the audience how to become millionaires. They're going to talk about how you're going to be a millionaire. Here's the only problem. The speaker's not a millionaire.
That's a problem.
I mean, how many consultants are there who are out there telling you the Steve Jobs way to do things? Except they're not Steve Jobs, and they didn't work with Steve Jobs, and they never met Steve Jobs. So yeah, they might have read a book or two about him, and they might have written an interesting theory about him. But in fact, wouldn't they be better off telling you their way of doing things, or go out and attain Steve Jobsian success, if that's a word? And
it is now.
It is now, because we just coined it. Right. So go become Jobsianly successful, and then get up and talk about it.
Let's talk about health, because you're in good health. People look at you and they go, gosh, Bruce, you have a crazy busy schedule. You run an ad agency. You're traveling constantly. You're on the road speaking on airplanes, going through airports, but yet you take care of your health. How do you do it?
It's very simple. I am certifiably insane.
Do you teach that? Can you
Yes.
Can you teach that level of insanity?
I absolutely can. It's very easy. I get up at 5 in the morning, and I go out and I run 5 to 10 miles almost every day. And if I'm not running, I'm going to the gym. And if I'm not going to the gym, I'm hopping in the pool. And when I travel, I take my running stuff. And it's just a commitment that I have made to myself and to my family that that's what I do. Now, before someone says, oh my goodness, but I can't run that far, I didn't start by running 5 to 10 miles every day. I started by running a block and walking a block. But I made a commitment, and I stick to it. It's very important to me, and it's something I do. You know, we talk a lot about I meet speakers, and they want to talk about becoming a motivational speaker. And I always say, I have a real problem with motivational speakers. I don't really believe in motivational speakers. And they go, what do you mean? I went to see so-and-so, and I was so motivated. I was so fired up. And I get that. I've seen these folks. And some of them are astoundingly talented. And they can get you so fired up that you think you could pull a train or walk on hot coals or whatever. And you can. The problem is 3 days later when, some guy in a motivational speech has convinced you that you can run a marathon and you're going to do it by God and you're going to do what it takes. And man, that's your goal. And yeah, that makes perfect sense. But 6 days later on Thursday morning at 4:30 in the morning when your alarm goes off, the motivational speaker is not there to say, come on, Mace. Let's go. We've committed to this. We're going to get out of bed and go do it. And that's what it comes down to. It's all about the commitment. There's no secret. There's no golden, there's nothing except making a commitment to do it and doing it.
What about when it becomes a habit? If you're running 5 to 10 miles a day, 6 or 7 days a week, it must be a habit at this point. Is it still hard for you to get out of bed and do it?
Yeah, getting out of bed is the hardest part. So you got to do everything you can do to be ready for it. Like, number one, go to sleep a little bit earlier. That usually helps. The other thing is I get all my running stuff together the night before. And in fact, we're empty nesters now, so I go put it in my daughter's room. So when I get out of bed, I leave the bedroom. I don't even wake my wife up. I leave the bedroom. My stuff's already there. I just pull it on and I go. If, in fact, I'm going to go to the office from running and I'm going to shower at the office, then my clothes for the next day are already packed. They're already in the trunk. Because otherwise, each one of those little things can become all the obstacle it takes to stop you from going. Oh, I stayed up a little too late. You know what? I don't want to get out of bed. And so you don't. Oh, I didn't get my running shoes out. Oh, you know what? I'd have to wake my wife up. I'm not going to do it. Oh, I didn't get my stuff ready for the office. Forget it. I'm not going to go. There's too many reasons, and it's too easy to say no. So I do whatever I can do to eliminate those objections. And then beyond that, again, it's commitment. I wake up at 5. I don't lay in bed. I don't say 5 more minutes. I put my feet on the floor. I get out of bed, and I go. Now, I got to tell you, the other thing is I found a great group of folks to run with. So I know they're going to be there waiting for me. And by the way, they know I'm going to be there waiting for them, so we motivate each other to get our lazy butts out of bed and show up.
So a big way is to get a partner. Now, when you're on the road, though, you don't have that partner.
No, when I'm on the road, I don't have that. Well, you know what? If it's a reoccurring event, well, I've made some friends at those events, and in fact, I do. But no, most of the time, I don't. So last week, I was in Massachusetts for a few days, and then I was in New York. I did run with somebody in New York that I know. We went to Central Park. That was just wonderful. But yeah, most of the time, I just make a point of doing it.
And you've been known to pay the concierge to run with you at the hotel.
Sure. Yes, I have.
It's a full-service hotel.
Whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes. What about food when you're on the road? That's a challenge for a lot of people. They say that's where they lose it. You're changing planes in Atlanta. You have 30 minutes to make a connection. So I had to eat McDonald's. Not to pick on McDonald's. That's all that was available to me. What do you do?
Well, it's not hard. This takes a little bit of planning as well. The time to make the decision is not when you get off a plane with 30 minutes to go and you're just ravished and just starving. That's not when you make a decision, because that's not when you make your best decision, right? So the time to make the decision is earlier, to know what you eat and don't eat, and then prepare for it. I always carry a little bag of almonds or cashews in my briefcase. If I have time, maybe I'll get an energy bar, which I don't particularly like, but I'll get them. If at a lot of hotels nowadays, there's a big bowl of apples sitting on the checkout counter, so I'll take 2 apples and I'll stick it in my briefcase. I don't need to feed myself with a full meal. I need to just get rid of that crazy hunger that's going to make me eat anything that's put in front of me.
Right. So you know those giant jars of cashews that they sell in Costco?
Yeah.
That's what I travel with. In fact, with the airlines now, that's my carry-on. That's all they let me take on. Just the cashews.
You buy the cashew jug that has the wheels on the bottom.
Oh, that's right, with the extending handles. But
no, you know what? Just buy a Ziploc bag. Yeah. Keep a Ziploc bag in your briefcase. Go to any convenience store, buy a bag of nuts. Nuts are great because they're very good for you, and they fill you up pretty quickly. Don't get the salted, honey roasted, grease fried, and you throw those in your bag. Is it the most satisfying meal in the world? No, but it's fine. You don't have to have a meal. You got to get that, oh my God, I'm starving feeling to go away.
You do, and nuts do a great job for that. Listen, besides owning a successful advertising agency and having a thriving speaking career, you are also a professional musician. A lot of people have heard you speak. They've heard you play the harmonica. You're unbelievable. I'm always amazed anytime you whip out your bag of harmonicas, ladies and gentlemen. He travels with a bag of harmonicas. How many people can you say that about? Does being a musician, does that play a role in your other career areas? For example, your speaking or your ad agency?
It never did. Being a musician was something that I did because I loved it and because music is just such an important part of my life, and I was not willing to give it up. But I decided years ago that it was not something I wanted to do for a living. First of all, I don't actually think I'm good enough. And second of all, it's just a struggle that I wasn't willing to go through. So it was not part of what I do, although if we were creating a jingle or something, I would use my musical abilities to help with that. However, someone pointed out to me once that when you speak at conferences, why don't you play the harmonica? And I said, oh, no, I couldn't do that. It's too silly. And I don't remember why, but they pushed me to do it, and I tried it, and I did it, and it worked phenomenally well. And, I talked about authenticity. Well, that's really something that's authentic to who I am. It's an important part of my life. I spend a lot of time with it. I love it. So now when I make new business presentations, I play. When I'm up on stage speaking to conferences, I've had a room of 4,000 people that I got to play for, and then I had them all playing the harmonica. It has become an important part of what I do. Here's the other thing I learned. As a musician, I'm okay, but compared to the virtuosos that are out there, I'm not even in the same league. However, if I get up in front of a group of, accountants or attorneys to speak at their annual meeting, guess what? I'm the biggest rock star they got. So whereas I'm never going to be invited to Carnegie Hall to play with Wynton Marsalis, I can certainly get up in front of these folks and play and have a wonderful time. So it's become a lot of fun for me. And it's also helped me build my brand because people say, you know what, this is authentic. This guy really loves this. They can see it. I can't help it when I play.
Is it your escape also, from everything else that you do? Because a lot of musicians, they seem like they're just in another place when they're playing. Is it that for you? Does it benefit your mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a bunch of books and all kinds of training tools that have been written about something called flow. And flow is when you're in that stage where you are thinking about nothing, and I don't want to sound corny, but you're thinking about nothing, yet you're thinking about everything. You're totally in the moment. You're paying attention to exactly what you're doing. And when I'm playing with a band and we're cooking along, and now it's my time to play a solo, I am so focused on what I'm doing and where the music's going to go and what the drummer's doing and how the bass player's playing that it just removes me from everything. Do I see the people in front of me? Of course. I'm an entertainer first. So, yes, I'm paying attention, but at the same time, it gives me just such an amazing release.
We all need that distraction, whatever it is. And what's so cool about yours is that it fits in your pocket.
That's right. If I was a cellist or I played the double bass, not so much. But this works out perfectly for me. It was not. By the way, it was not intentional, although it worked out pretty darn well.
Well, I used to play the saxophone, so I was always the guy who was sitting in front of the trombone section which really was very, very annoying. First of all, you're always getting hit in the back of the head with the slides. And then, of course, they always dumped the spit valve right on top of you, at least when they were in high school. I don't know if the professionals do it at this stage, but I don't want to know.
Yeah, well, I was a trumpet player in high school, and I still play my trumpet too. So, I've seen a lot of that. I love trombones. I think that's just an astounding instrument.
It is an astounding instrument, as long as you're not sitting in front of it, getting whacked in the back of your head.
Fair enough.
Bruce, back on relationships. You've got a great marriage. I've met your wife, Gloria. She's just a beautiful person inside and out. So an important question is, with all of the business responsibilities that you have, how do you balance it all? How do you balance the business, the ad agency, the speaking with your marriage and your family?
I don't know the answer to that question, Mace. I know that when I hear people talking about balance, I kind of get a little bit itchy because people will say, I don't have balance in my life. I need to make more money. Well, the obvious answer is work harder or work smarter. Well, then they'll say, oh, but that doesn't work for me because I need to spend more time. I need to have more family time. Then you say, well, then spend more time with your family. They say, no, but that doesn't work because I need more money. I can't do both. Go, okay, then you have two choices. You have one choice. You have two options. You either learn to make more or want less. See, I think the problem with balance is it doesn't actually, like work-life balance, certainly, I don't think it actually exists.
So it's a myth.
I believe it is. I think something has to give. You have to decide what your priorities are, and you have to work towards your priorities. Now, I'm very lucky. My wife, besides being all the things you said, beautiful inside and out, which is totally true, she's also quite understanding and very patient, and for some bizarre reason, she adores me and puts up with me. So that makes life a lot easier. But you can't have everything. You just can't. And unfortunately, I think this affects women more than it affects men because after the suffragette movement, after women's lib, after all this feminism, which I believe in wholeheartedly, I am the husband, son, brother, and father of ardent feminists. I am myself. But I think women in some degree have been sold a bill of goods, which says that you have to be all these things. You have to be a superwoman. You have to be talented at work. You have to be a great mother. You have to be a great spouse. You have to make great meals. You have to stay in great shape. You have to be great in bed. You have to be great. And you know what? That just makes me tired thinking about it. So I think there has to be some reality imposed on all of this. And I think what you'll find when you read about people who are spectacularly successful at anything, they're not always so successful at other things because other things don't allow focus. So priority becomes important because at that point you're going to decide what matters to you, what you're willing to do, and let's face it, what you're not willing to do.
It almost sounds like the squeaky wheel gets the oil. In other words, if things seem to be going well with the marriage and the family, then it's okay to focus your time on your business. If the business needs a little more time, it'll let you know. If the family needs a little bit more time, it'll let you know.
Well, sure, except that with both of those things, there is no 1 to 10. When is your business successful enough or too successful? Yes, when it's going down, you know it. But when it's going up, when is enough? When is your marriage good enough or your family time good enough? I think that's part of the myth, thinking that, well, I'll just do this because it requires the time now, and then I'm going to go do something else later. I think, and sometimes, by the way, I think it requires being honest with yourself and with your partner to say, look, sweetheart, this week I have to work my tail off because if I don't, we're not going to be able to make payroll. And, if it's a partnership, your partner's going to have to say, I get that. Okay, I'm going to back off. And then maybe some weeks you have to say, you know what? I'm not going to go to that networking dinner. I'm not going to do those other things. I'm going to stay home. When our kids were little, I really tried as hard as I could to be home for dinner, if I was in town, to be home for dinner every night. Often it meant, at the time, going back to the office after dinner and going back to work after the kids were in bed. Now with my laptop, I could have worked at home. But I don't really think I don't really think it's as cut and dried as we all would like it to be. I think it requires a lot of thought and a lot of prioritizing.
It does indeed. Do you have a date night?
Boy, here's my corny answer. We try to make every night date night. No, we don't have one on the calendar, but we do try to spend as much time together as possible.
Well, just from looking at you, whatever you're doing is working, Bruce. When I see you and Gloria together, keep doing it.
Well, thank you. I think it has all to do with her.
Yeah, well, it probably does. But now you're a pretty decent guy yourself.
Although she has a phenomenal career that requires a lot of her time and, more importantly, her emotional involvement. So I don't know how she does it.
Well, she's an amazing lady, and you're both lucky to have found each other. I know what that's like. Let me ask you, do you have a favorite quote that you'd like to share with the listeners?
Oh boy, I have a lot of favorite quotes, but I think my favorite-ist, no, that's not a word, but one of them is, you can't bluff a man who's not paying attention. And what I take that to mean and why I think it's so important, because it just sounds silly when you first hear it. But again, it gets back to that prioritizing. If you decide what matters to you and what doesn't matter to you, then things don't get in the way. You can't get me upset about something that I don't care about. In fact, I can't get you upset about something you don't care about. But you have to decide ahead of time what it is you're willing to be upset about and what you're not.
What a great point. You know, I've heard you share that quote before. I never really thought about it as deeply as I just did.
Well, we'll go to a party, and then after the party, my wife will say to me, "Oh, my God, I can't believe what that woman was saying." And I'll say, "What woman?" She goes, "That woman in the green dress that you were talking to." And I said, "Oh, I wasn't paying attention." You know, she was ranting about something. I was being polite and nodding and smiling, but I wasn't really, because I don't care. I'm not going to get upset. Just because it upsets you doesn't mean it's going to upset me.
You're an avid reader. Favorite book you've read?
Well, here's a couple books that I've read recently that I loved. I read a book called The Next 100 Years by a guy, George, I forget his last name. He's the director of Strat4. Strat4 is a geopolitical consulting company that works with oil companies and governments to talk about where they should be making their investments and how they have to protect themselves. And as he says, if only 5% of what he's saying comes true, that would still be amazing. But he talks about what's going to happen over the next 100 years based on what's going on today geopolitically. And I just found that fascinating. I couldn't put it down. I did have to keep a map next to me because I realized that my knowledge of geography, especially in the Urals and in Asia, is much worse than I'd like it to be. But it was fascinating. Another great book I read that I loved, it wasn't the last week or two, but I just loved this book. It's called How to Live, The Life of Montaigne, and it is a biography of the essayist Michael Montaigne. Of course, his name's French, but that's about as close as I can come. He was a 16th century nobleman in France, and he's considered the world's first blogger because he wrote what ultimately so many people write about today, except he was the first one to do it. And the woman who wrote the book, Sarah Bakewell, she organized the book based on his essays. So it's just fascinating. I really enjoyed it. And so much of what he talks about makes so much sense today, even though he wrote it all those centuries ago.
So, Bruce, any parting words for our listeners, a last piece of advice you would like to give them with respect to their careers, their relationships, and their health?
One thing that I think you need to be concerned and aware of and deal with constructively is what's called the GMOT phenomenon. And GMOT phenomenon is when you go to a conference or you listen to a podcast.
Can you spell that out?
Sure. G-M-O-T, GMOT.
GMOT, okay.
And so, or you listen to a podcast or you read a news, whatever, and you read about a new technology. Oh, for the sake of argument, we could say Twitter, or you could say it was the book that I just recommended, or some concept that you need to work with. And GMOT stands for Get Me One of Those. So you rush out and you get it. You get a Twitter account, or you get a Facebook account, or you get an Instagram account, or you buy a new iPhone 6, or you read this book, or whatever. And it might work out great, and it might not. However, you don't need the new technology, the new book, the new website, the new app. You need a strategy. And instead of creating a brand, instead of creating what you think is going to be a balanced life, decide what you want. Don't let these things become the stimulus for your action. Make it the other way around. The books, the podcasts, the technology are tools. And you know the old saying, if the only tool you have is a hammer, every solution looks like a nail. Don't let the tools decide how you're going to act. You decide, and then fill your life with the appropriate tools.
Bruce, great advice. Bruce Turkel, ladies and gentlemen, what is the best way for our audience to find out more about you?
Very easy. If you want to read my blog, I write about this stuff week after week after week. It's just my name, bruceturkel.com, and you can just click on blog. If you want to reach me personally, my email address is bturkel@turkelbrands. So that's my name, TURKELBRANDS.com.
And with respect to Bruce's blog, I am one of the readers, along with some 30,000 close friends of mine. Bruce Turkel, thanks so much for being on the I'm Giving Notice podcast, and we touched on all of life's big three. Very, very cool. Bruce, I look forward to speaking with you again.
Thank you, Mace. I'm looking forward to it, too. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Bruce Turkel, ladies and gentlemen, he is an amazing guy and a great friend. Don't forget to stay focused on managing life's big three: your career, your relationships, and your health. We're here to help you do that at I'm Giving Notice. Please let us know the topics you would like to hear about by sending me an email, mace@imgivingnotice.com. Until next time, this is Mace Horoff.
This has been the I'm Giving Notice podcast with Mace Horoff. For show notes and more information about how you can take control of life's big three, please visit www.imgivingnotice.com.